Hello and welcome to another video and podcast for FantasyFootballScout.co.uk. My name is David and today we're going to have a look at the Scout Picks bus team ahead of Gameweek 8. Now every week we have a look at who the editorial team have decided is the best set of 11 players going into the next round of fixtures, and of course we get an early look in at that with the bus team, which of course is a term coined by our friends over at the Always Cheating podcast. That is of course the team that you set of your FPL team after the deadline has passed, almost immediately afterwards, in fact, as soon as the game is ready, so that just in case you get hit by a bus, at least your FPL team won't look particularly embarrassing come the next deadline. And so that's where we are at the moment with the best players, but with a view that it could change. We've got lots of injuries flying about FPL once again this week. There's going to be lots of important things coming out of the European games as well, just to help you guys out with the context. Recording this on Wednesday afternoon, so it's after some of the Champions League games, but not all of them. We, of course, on Thursday we'll have some Europa League matches as well, and then press conferences through Thursday and Friday, and they can always end up changing the Scout Picks team. So if you want to know what the final team is, then of course make sure you're checking out the Fantasy Football Scout website on Friday, but also the social channels as well, so that we can get an accurate fix on who are the best players this week. As ever, when we get to the final team at the end of the video, go and drop in the comments below how many players you've got currently in your team who are in that selection, or perhaps how many you will have after you've made your planned transfers as well. And of course, it's always important to remember that don't feel too stressed if this team is very, very different from what you've currently got. You have to remember that the Scout Picks is not necessarily who you should have. You don't have to have all of them this week, because of course the Scout Picks does have that benefit of effectively being a free hit every week. We can pick 15 players for this team. It's all within budget, but we don't have to worry about transfers from one week to the next, whereas you may have to in your team. So just because someone's not here doesn't mean they're not a hold in your team, for example, and just because someone is here doesn't necessarily mean you have to down tools and do everything you can to sign that player. So do remember that, and see if you can hopefully, with your transfers, get to a good chunk of these players so you can stay on track with what the good fixtures are. Now, before we go through all of the different players who are in contention for this team and then have a look at what it currently looks like in its bus team format, we've got a couple of pieces of housekeeping as ever. Now, a lot of the stats that go into some of these decisions from the editorial team, that's Neil and Tom and Mark, come from the Fantasy Football Scout members area. If you haven't already signed up for the Gameweek 8 deadline, then do take advantage of the fact that you can still save up to 30% on those preseason prices. And that's really going to help you. If you're on your wildcard as well, the members area is going to be very, very helpful for you to have a look at upcoming fixtures, defensive qualities, both good and bad for defenders you might want to sign, but also teams you want to attack with your attacking players. And of course, you can have a look at just how good the players you're thinking about have been from an underlying statistics perspective, and all of that is going to really help you with your decisions. This video is also sponsored by Betway, the principal partners of West Ham and the betting partner of Brighton. On Friday, they announced the heroes of the weekend. Bet £10 on Player Market's top scorer of the heroes, and they will credit a £1 free bet for every point up to £20. Betway are also running giveaways, including shirts and tickets for West Ham and Brighton. We know not everyone gambles, which is something we take very seriously. That's why on our website we have a filter that you can turn on, which allows you to opt out of gambling ads. For those who do enjoy it, do so responsibly and safely. There's more info about Betway in the description. You, of course, have to be 18 or over to play, and we encourage everybody to gamble responsibly and to begambleaware.org. When the fun stops, stop. Let's move on to the season ticker for the Scout Picks for Game Week 8, because of course this is going to very much help us work out which players should make it into the team based on who's got the best fixtures. And it is a tricky one, because we've got a lot of teams who wouldn't normally be invested in with good fixtures at the moment. There's a little bit of a swing in that regard, and then of course we've got some highly owned players in a very tricky fixture this week. So at the top end of the fixture ticker for Game Week 8, Fulham are hosting Sheffield United, Crystal Palace host Nottingham Forest, Spurs go away to Luton, Everton host Bournemouth, and Chelsea go away to Burnley. So they're the 5 best teams in terms of fixture this week. How much we trust them, we'll find out in a minute. And then the teams that have the trickier fixtures, well, we've got Manchester City and Arsenal both at the foot of the season ticker, specifically for Game Week 8, because of course they are meeting each other at the Emirates Stadium. We've got Brentford going to Old Trafford to face Manchester United. We've got West Ham hosting Newcastle, Brighton hosting Liverpool, and then of course that's good enough for Liverpool to also be in the bottom 6 as well. So it means it's very difficult for Liverpool, Brighton, West Ham, Brentford, Man City and Arsenal players to make it in, and there's a lot of players in our teams from those clubs at the moment. So it's going to be a bit of a tricky game week, I think. It might even be quite a low scoring one. So I think this is one of those weeks where I wouldn't be too nervous about necessarily feeling like you're short some of the players with the good fixtures, or maybe even short some of the players in the scout picks. It's all team dependent, of course. But as I said, the fixtures this week, there's a lot of good teams going up against each other, and that sometimes can affect things. So, as ever, we've got 3 categories of players who could or could not make it into the scout picks for Game Week 8. We've got the likely lads, we've got those in contention, and then we've got those who are a bit of a long shot. And of course, the in contention is usually the biggest section, because we've got 2 or 3 players who are probably going in. We've got 2 or 3 players who it's worth talking about as an honourable mention, but probably aren't going in. And then the in contention, well, as I said, tricky this week. Lots of choices we could go with, and we've already had to make one change already to the original bust team. This is technically bust team 2.0 because of the continued injuries that keep swirling around FPL. But let's start off with the likeliest of the lads, and that, of course, has to start with Tottenham this week with their very appealing fixture against Luton. Son has done very well recently. He's had 6 goals in his last 4 matches going into this game against Luton. He's been involved in 7 Opta-defined big chances. 6 of his own, and he's created 1 for someone else. So that's quite a good piece of involvement in terms of quality. And of course, Luton themselves have been very obliging. It was 12 goals conceded in 6 matches before the Burnley game on Tuesday. It's now 14 goals in 7. So they're conceding on average 2 goals per game. And with that in mind, we would imagine that someone in the form of Son is probably going to benefit from that. But it's also enough for us to say, to be honest, we probably also want James Maddison as well. He's done quite well this season. Now, the interesting thing about Luton is that they have been very obliging in a certain area of the pitch. It will probably help Destiny Udogie. So we've got so far, Luton have given up 30 chances from their right flank over the last 6. That doesn't take into account the Burnley game, but it's still a decent set of data. It's one of the 4 highest totals from that flank in the division. And so that's good for Destiny Udogie playing on the left. Pedro Porro is also in the conversation, of course. His underlying stats are a little bit better, actually, than Udogie's. He's had 9 shots to Udogie's 1, 9 key passes to Udogie's 7. So he also looks very good as well. We think that Udogie has a good matchup here specifically, but we actually think that both of these players will probably have a good game week, because Luton haven't been very good for XG creation. They have been very good, or rather very bad, I suppose, at stopping XGC. So it's a good time for a Spurs triple out. That probably comes as no shock to people. The more difficult decisions do come in other areas of the team. So let's have a look at those who are in contention only at the moment. And we have to start with Erling Haaland. There has been a lot of talk recently about going no Haaland. He has got some tricky fixtures coming up. However, it's worth pointing out, and it's very much part of this conversation, that just because he's got difficult fixtures doesn't actually have to be a bad thing. Going against Arsenal, he scored against them last season, and so his form against so-called Big Six sides is actually quite good. So he scored 6 goals and got 4 assists in 9 appearances against that type of opposition in 22-23. He averaged 7.1 points per start against those teams. And when you consider his ownership is still very, very high, may still be auto-captained by some people who perhaps forgot about their team or really just trust him to get the goals. So, not having that could be quite damaging, considering that he's not necessarily as likely to blank against these other big teams as we perhaps think. Now, Bukayo Saka has to kind of be in the conversation. We know that he's got this latest injury, and it seems to be turning into quite a saga. My personal view, which is actually separate from the scout picks, is that I think that what may happen is this continued insistence on him playing may actually cause him some sort of long-term injury. However, if Arteta is to say that he is fit, and that's why he's in this conversation, if he is to say that he's fit, then he has to be in the conversation, because he's come through a week where he didn't really train very much going into the Bournemouth game. There was nervousness around whether it was going to start. Started the game, 9 points. So he's a big deliverer of points, widely owned, got good stats when he plays. So he's going to have to be in the conversation. Rodri also not going to be available for Manchester City. So the chances of them conceding go up, arguably, with him. And interestingly enough, since Rodri made his Premier League debut in 2019, City have lost 33% of the Premier League matches they have played without him, compared to only 7.5% of the matches where he's been in the team. So this is a good opportunity for goals against City, to be honest, and even possibly a result. And of course, Wolves did beat them last time out. So the absence of Rodri is potentially pertinent here. If Saka's fit, Ødegaard also in the conversation as well, because he's been in good form as well. Now, outside of those players in midfield, in the sort of more expensive positions, there's obviously ongoing reservations about Man United's 2 big guys in Rashford and Fernandes. They're sort of on the undecided pile for the scout picks at the moment. because there's two ways of looking at it. On one hand, Rashford scored in the corresponding fixture against Brentford last season, and despite that sort of hasn't necessarily delivered as much as we want, he has still had more shots in the box than any other FPL midfielder this season. So it's not for lack of trying. And sometimes when these big players go on these runs where they don't necessarily get the returns, but it's not for the lack of trying. Eventually, it's sort of like a bottlenecked effect, and everything comes out in one go, and you end up with some big hauls on the bounce. So that could still happen with him. Fernandes is kind of the same, to be honest. Scored the winner against Burnley last time out, and still has some underlying numbers. But it's a big but with United this season. We've been saying this for several weeks, and it is taking its time to come to fruition. And that is obviously at the back of our minds. Brentford aren't necessarily an easy opponent. They're not doing as well as they have been. So maybe there's that. But certainly Brentford in the past know how to up their game against Man United, and we've seen that a couple of times. Then other teams to consider this week: Crystal Palace. Their defensive numbers are quite good. Gay's back in the team now. Anderson and Johnston continue to score points as well. They are going to be without, in all likelihood, Eze for Gameweek 8. He actually made the Scout Picks bus team when it was announced officially on the site yesterday morning. But since that time, we've heard this confirmation. Well, it's actually not confirmation yet. It may well have been confirmed by the time you're watching or listening to this, but it's largely just reports in the media at the moment. But it seems to hold up that he's probably going to be out for about 6 weeks. Now, does that impact their defensive potential? Maybe. It's hard to say. They're obviously going to offer less going forward, so perhaps they're going to be a bit more susceptible to not being in control of games as much, and maybe may have to give up more chances. But they are a team that knows how to put on a defensive rearguard, so I'm not necessarily as concerned about Crystal Palace's defence's potential being knocked by Eze. To be honest, I think that they've done very well for defensive returns of late, and so that's why they are, of course, in the conversation. Now, another team that has done very well for defensive returns actually is Fulham. Specifically the goalkeeper Bernd Leno. I think it's 2 clean sheets for Fulham so far. He's top for projected points according to the Rate My Team tool. In the goalkeeper position for the upcoming game week, they've got a very good fixture against Sheffield United, which should also benefit Andreas Pereira as well. Now, we all saw Sheffield United completely taken apart by Newcastle in that 8-0 win for the Magpies, and that largely was underpinned by Sheffield United's susceptibility to set pieces, defending free kicks and corners, but also headers as well. Andreas Pereira is very much on those duties and could benefit from that against the Blades. Elsewhere, we've got Liverpool assets in contention as well. Salah, Diaz and Nunez, they all could be involved in the team. They're going up against Brighton. Defensively, not that much of a concern. They are a hard fixture, of course, because Brighton are a good team, but you always know teams are going to score goals against them. They've conceded 14 goals in their first 7 matches. Although with both of these teams, in terms of who we might include, we do have to sort of wait and see, because there's European games that come up. It's probably an advantage for Liverpool here. They're going to be playing at Anfield on Thursday night. Brighton will have to travel to the south of France. There's a similar caveat here, actually, to be honest, with the Aston Villa players who are in contention for the Gameweek 8 Scout Picks. Watkins and Diaby had been in contention, but Diaby is now ruled out of the European game, and we're going to have to keep an eye on that. They're going up against Wolves, of course, but there's actually quite a tight turnaround for Villa. So there's just 60 hours between full-time against Zrinjski Mostar on Thursday night and then the kickoff in Game Week 8 against Wolves. I think if you've got those Aston Villa players, you obviously hold them. I've got Matty Cash. He's also on the radar as well. I think you hold him too, but it's perhaps maybe pertinent just to temper expectations a little bit based around, that not exactly ideal travel schedule. Could also benefit Pedro Neto, to be honest, because I know there's people looking at him. Wolves, of course, will be rested midweek, having not been involved in any European competitions. He got his 5th assist of the season, Neto, against Man City. He's had some good numbers, and so this could be a good opportunity to move towards him. I know he's more popular on the wildcards than he is in the free transfers, but he's been on my watch list for 3 or 4 weeks, and I do like him. If I had the space to do it with my team, I wouldn't be saying it's the worst option in the world, to be honest. And I think that it could be some attacking returns here for Wolves based on that Aston Villa turnaround. Another team in that situation, Newcastle as well. Kieran Trippier, of course, has been doing very well. Kieran Trippier is doing very well for chances created amongst all defenders so far this season, which is unsurprising. West Ham in the bottom 3 for chances conceded from set plays and from headers as well, which is going to benefit Trippier perhaps over some of the other defensive assets at Newcastle in a week where maybe they're unlikely to keep a clean sheet here. They've got a big job on against PSG on Wednesday night, and we don't know what impact that's going to have. And to be honest, knowing the way the last few weeks have going, you're probably listening to this on a Thursday going, surely David knows Kieran Trippier broke his leg on Wednesday night. I mean, honestly, who knows? Who knows at this point? So he may not be involved. Levi Colwill, Tarkowski, and Dalla also in consideration for defensive duties. Tarkowski is another one who could benefit from where teams are susceptible to specific things. So, for example, Bournemouth, they're also in the bottom 3 for headed chances conceded and efforts from set plays conceded, so that could help Tarkowski. I know he's still in a few teams, to be honest. From the beginning of the season, probably rotting on people's benches, but going against Bournemouth, who could be Solanke-less again. Everton's defence has actually improved a little bit in the last couple of weeks. Could be a big haul on here for Tarkowski, so it's worth bearing that in mind. And of course, their susceptibility, Bournemouth, to headers and set plays, could also help Dominic Calvert-Lewin. He's now down to just 5.8 and putting in some good displays in recent game weeks. Good price. Still a bit of a differential, so he's very much in contention as well. I'll just list off the players who are kind of in the long shots category, because they're probably not going to end up in there in all likelihood. But we've got Nicholas Jackson, he's back. Good fixture for Chelsea. Lyle Foster, he's also back. And Burnley obviously benefited from him getting a goal against Luton on Tuesday night. Visser as well. Bowen and Burmo, Matoma and Decore, all outside possibilities to make the scout picks. And we finally have a word on Raheem Sterling. There's not that much wrong with his underlying stats at the moment, for example. He's in the top 10 for midfielders for shots in the box. But we want to see a little bit more output from him than what we got against Fulham on Monday night. He's blanked in 6 of his 7 Premier League appearances. So, you know, good stats. Maybe a bit of a differential. Is he going to make the team? Probably not. But it's worth mentioning him because at some point he's probably going to do something. Might have to just poke him with a stick before we get too much from him. But anyway, what does all that mean? You've probably skipped to this point in the video anyway. Probably missed all of that preamble. Let me know in the comments if you skipped to the end, because we do like to find out who you guys are. But here we are. This is the Scout Picks Bus team, newly updated after I sent a bit of a quick message to Neil this afternoon to be like, can you swap Eze out? Otherwise, I'm going to look like an idiot on a video. So we've got Leno in goal. We've got Tarkowski, Anderson and Destiny Udogie as the back 3. So really leaning into the weaknesses that Luton have displayed on the side of the pitch where Destiny Udogie gets to play. We've got Salah, Maddison, Son, and then it's Andreas Pereira who comes in for Eze. And then up front, Watkins. We still think that despite that quick turnaround for Villa, that they do have a good fixture. Wolves' defence has been obliging this year. Haaland continues to keep his place. We do think that he's perhaps going to get a little bit overlooked this game week, not necessarily in terms of ownership, perhaps maybe in terms of captaincy. He's definitely going to get something, we think, against Arsenal because he does do pretty well in these big games. And then Calvert-Lewin coming in as a nice differential. I know a lot of people are considering him. You can feel affirmed in the fact that he's currently in the Scout Picks Bus team. On the bench is Areola, Colwill, Lascelles of Newcastle, and Chelsea's Enzo Fernandez. And so that's as it is at the moment. Do keep an eye out for the Fantasy Football Scout channels on social media, but also the website to find out the updated team. Of course, that is going to be heavily influenced by the team news video, which goes out on Friday afternoon at 3 p.m. UK time, as ever, with Neil and Joe. So do not give that a miss this week, because there's just so many flags still. It's Flag City at the moment. Very much like a certain World Cup. Everybody is waving their flag. So do keep an eye on that. And yeah, like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell notification as well so you don't miss that all-important team news video. And afterwards, you'll actually get to enjoy the usual shenanigans from Az and Sam to give you the tactical knock-on effect of some of those injuries if you're worried about your particular team. But with that, I shall leave you fine, folks, to enjoy the rest of your FPL tinkering, and I shall see you next time.